Hi, everyone. My name is Natalie Gochner, and I represent the political center. This is both sides of the aisle, and I have on the political right, John Dougal.
Hey, great to be with you again.
And on the political left, Shireen Ghorbani.
Hello.
Welcome back.
I'm back from the wild.
It's sunshine, and let's talk about uncertainty.
It's spring. It's like spring out there.
And paralysis and all these problems in Washington, D.C. I'm just pulling my hair
Who needs
out.
a 401k anyway?
Yeah.
So I think everyone knows this, but tell us just a little bit about your background, Natalie. What is your expertise?
Listen, I mean, I'm an economist by training. I'm the type that
Not just on radio.
my first semester of college, I knew I wanted to study economics. I took every economics class I could get for my entire time. Got a master's degree in economics and now lead a public policy institute that specializes in the Utah economy. So this tariff crisis has actually prompted me to pull out my textbooks.
Okay.
Isn't that interesting? Because I just wanted to verify. Like you can pull out an Econ 101, principles of economics textbook, and there'll be a chapter on global trade.
And
then,
what does it say?
Oh, they're just basically that tariffs are distortionary to the market, and that when you let people engage in trade, efficient outcomes happen, and prices are cheaper, and choice is better, and efficiency prevails. Anyway, you can then take a macroeconomics textbook and get a lot of the same kind of thinking.
So if you were president, you would not do what's happening today.
Well, I've been trying to keep an open mind, stay curious, about these things. The thing that I think economists dislike the most is the broad-based nature of it. So not that you're being surgical and strategic, but that you're just throwing it out there in a broad-based way. And then the inconsistencies of it. On again, off again. How do you plan? So I've spent the last, several weeks interacting with a lot of business leaders, and I've heard their stories.
Yeah.
They're not good.
They're not good.
Yeah.
What you're saying actually really echoes some of the commentary that came out of an interview, I think just today, the day that we're recording, with Gretchen Whitmer, the governor of Michigan, who I'm a fan of.
A manufacturing state, a border state, all these things.
Who said a couple things that stood out. One was that, tariffs really should be a scalpel and not a hammer. Mm-hmm. This is a hammer. Mm-hmm. And also really ask the question, how is this going to strategically benefit the American economy or the American consumer? Mm-hmm. From where I stand, this is chaos that honestly Democrats never would have engaged in. Mm-hmm. If Kamala Harris was our president right now, you would not be seeing this. I just have to put that out there. But I also want to add that the way that these tariffs play out for everyday working people is that the impact on poor and working class families, besides the billionaires who are losing in the stock market, the way that these Trump tariffs hit working class people is disproportionately greater than it is for the wealthiest in this country.
Yeah. John, we don't have to have you on the right defend this, but you should have a perspective about how this is being implemented.
Well, I'm a free trade guy.
Yeah.
And so I've always complained about managed trade, all these,
picking winners
trade
and
treaties
losers
that we have that are really picking winners and losers by industry or favored companies. And I can understand the argument of reciprocal tariffs. Okay, if they're going to impose 5%, we'll impose 5% to try and get them to de-escalate. Turns out reciprocal did not really mean reciprocal. I mean, when you start getting into trade deficits and calling some type of tariff, I'm sorry.
That's stunning.
To me, that's...
Yeah, it wouldn't pass a test in economics.
Right, and I was telling my wife...
Here's the national policy of our government.
Yeah, and my wife was asking me some questions. I said, well, I mean, from my perspective, and I'm not the economist, but I was telling her, I have a trade deficit with the local grocery store. I buy a lot of stuff from them. They don't buy anything from me. But hopefully, boom, 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 somewhere along the way, it works out in the wash.
Yeah.
And I said, in worst case, if it doesn't work out in the wash, then we got a bunch of people taking green pieces of paper from us that they couldn't actually get goods for. Well, and so that's kind of a good deal. So, the trade deficit is not this horrible thing.
Doesn't bother you.
Now, as I've mentioned, what I would do to fix the trade issue, I'd cut regulations, I'd lower the tax, and I'd entice folks, not bribing them to come, but entice them to say America is the best place to do business. Come do business here. So you're not throwing up a bunch of tariffs.
But a couple of examples of that would be the CHIPS Act, President Biden. The infrastructure
I think the CHIPS Act is a bad thing because that's bribing companies.
What this is doing is trying to onshore, bring back manufacturing to this country. And I think there's a critique from the left on free trade, right? Like I can say, you're sitting here saying you're a free trade guy. Free trade has hollowed out some of the economies in places like Michigan and in other manufacturing centers in this country. It has. And it has provided a great amount of wealth for stockholders and some wealthy business owners. I think there's actually a middle ground here that's a much more reasonable and strategic approach to what happens in our
I also
future.
want to put on the table that a lot of times what people call the hollowing out of manufacturing or the middle class or whatever, they're looking at jobs data and they're looking at how the manufacturing jobs have declined so dramatically and whatnot. But output, value of production's gone up.
Yeah.
And what this means is that
modernization.
Technological advancements. And so every worker is creating more value and you need fewer workers to create the same value. That's progress. We got to get those workers trained in something else that works in the modern economy.
Yep. So I would just say the Reinvestment Act that was passed by Joe Biden, again, the infrastructure bill, many of the agenda items that Biden brought forward and that were in some of these are addressing the very things that you're asking.
So, in some of the hollowing out, I'll just point out, in the Northeast, they've complained about the hollowing out as jobs have gone to the South. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's not tariffs. That's an issue of policies, regulations, tax policy, and those
competition,
those jurisdictions.
Yeah. Hey, what about this? I'll call it a bro culture. I don't know what else to call it, but these fractures that are starting to emerge in the Trump administration, and the most evident one right now, of course, is Elon Musk and Peter Navarro. We have the spokesperson for the White House.
You're not going to say that nickname that he gave him?
Yeah. The spokesperson for the White House, Caroline Leavitt, saying, boys will be boys. And I'm just like, wow.
Sometimes we like our public spouts.
They're calling each other, names. This is getting pretty interesting to watch, but it's not very presidential, very professional.
No, and Musk, I think, knows quite a bit about trade. And so I think he sees the ramifications of where we're going on this, and it's not a good outcome.
Yeah. What do you two make of the argument that this is all about China? This is the narrative today that we're recording on the day that Trump put a pause.
Yeah, there's another pause. Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, we got to pause again?
Yes.
On again, off again. I can't keep track.
Yeah. A big pause. And the
I thought we were giving 104%.
But the idea pause on everyone but China.
Yeah.
And so now you're starting to see the spin, I'll call it, of the art of the deal and that this is a negotiating tactic and this is all about China. John?
I don't think it's all about China.
Peter Navarro is a China, conspiracy guy, a China hater.
Yeah, I don't think it's all about China, but I think it's significantly about China. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think it's still about various other countries, but first and foremost, yes, it's about China.
Yeah, I really fail to call this a strategy, right? I don't think this is a coherent policy. So do I think that there's sort of an underlying sentiment about China that may be driving some of this? Maybe.
Yeah.
Hard to say.
Hey, before we break, I want to make sure we talk about this IRS acting administrator who quit.
Well, before you go there,
okay.
I mean, let's just talk about China.
Yeah.
Why do we have concerns about China? There are so many items that are being built in China that we're heavily dependent on them when it comes to drugs and pharmaceuticals and electronics and on and on and on. You look, and I understand the concern from a national security perspective. Now, there's different ways to address that. Mm-hmm. But yes, from my perspective, we have become too beholden on China.
Mm-hmm. Well, get ready for prices to rise.
That's right.
Because they have helped keep prices down. Okay, IRS acting administrator, he quit over an agreement to share immigrants' tax data with ICE. This one touched a nerve with me because I'm really familiar with Census Bureau work. And the Census Bureau in 1942 repealed the Protection of Individual Data Act to give data on Japanese Americans to the Defense Department. Yeah, so that we could intern Japanese Americans
which
at
we
a
did
time
right
of war.
Here
Yeah, which we did in this state. I'm proud of this administrator for quitting over the sharing of personal information that the government says is protected.
This goes to my concern that the government collects way too much information on us, first and foremost. I mean, I have concerns with the IRS in and of itself. You look at the magnitude of information, personal information we're turning over. This is one of those things that people thought was a valuable tool that clearly we can see in this case is becoming a weapon used against certain individuals.
Yeah.
Well, shock of all shocks. I think a lot of people do know this, but I am constantly stunned by how many people do not understand that there are many undocumented folks who are contributing to Social Security, to Medicare, to our state and local taxes, often to the fact that they never receive that benefit back, right? So when we think about the long-term economic destabilization from going after individuals who are paying into a system who never take from it, this is further, I think, diminishing the long-term stability of this country.
Shireen, sticking with you, you saw that the federal judge ordered the White House to restore access to the Associated Press.
Yes, yes.
I could kind of see this freedom of press, prevailing here. But
And let's remember why they got booted. They got booted because they refused to change in the AP Style Guide. To change referring to the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. So this is absolutely petty and completely nuts.
If I'm not mistaken, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints likes to be called the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, not the Mormons. And I don't think the AP Style Guide has quite changed that yet. We'll see.
I don't think so.
But in any case, it is funny.
Can't we just call it the Gulf?
It is funny, the power of the AP Style Guide.
Yeah, it really is. It's a powerful tool. And I think that this is, a win for freedom of press.
Yeah. John, thoughts there?
I just think it's silly that we even had to go down this path on that topic. Maybe they can also fix their style guide.
You also saw that the Supreme Court allows Trump to continue using the Alien Enemies Act of 1798 to deport immigrants. John, just 30 seconds on that.
I think what that was really saying is the court was saying, this is not ready for us to hear. Let it continue to work itself up through the district courts.
Procedural.
But what they are also saying is that, and I believe it was a unanimous decision, that people have a right to due process in this country.
Yes.
But understand this, and I hope the listeners are with me, at least in understanding, that if undocumented folks, if criminals don't have due process, none of us have due process. Mm-hmm. It requires a categorical implementation, or they can just look at somebody like me and say,
judgment.
You're not a citizen.
Yeah.
And then I, or anyone can fall subject to serious abuse of the government, which is what we're currently seeing.
Well said.
Minnesota part of Canada now?
I'm from North Dakota.
I'm sorry.
Hey,
just teasing.
We have to take a short break, but Natalie Gochner with John Dougal and Shireen Gorbani. Stay tuned, everybody.
You're listening to Both Sides of the Aisle on Utah Public Radio. We love to hear from listeners like you. If you would like to send us a comment, email bsotapodcast@gmail.com. That's bsotapodcast@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. Shireen Gorbani on the left.
John Dougal on the right.
Natalie Gochner. I represent the political center, and this is Both Sides of the Aisle.
Were you considering joining me?
I was with a group.
Writing that fence.
I was with a group of Republicans today, and we just had to all kind of share a little tidbit. I'll tell you the tidbit I shared when I was in Washington as an intern. This is when Tip O'Neill, Ronald Reagan were back there. But Ronald Reagan had a college Republicans' birthday party at the White House that I was invited to, and I showed up, and there's a picture of me shaking Ronald Reagan's hand or whatever, but it made it in People magazine.
Oh, very cool.
I don't have it. I just remember, showing it around there. But seriously, it just showed up.
You're going to have to track it down.
I didn't keep it. Anyway.
You need an autographed copy.
Hey, but so my Republican credentials are that good.
I like it. Well, I was on the cover of Time.
Come on. Tell us the story.
I didn't mean to say that in such a one-upping way.
That's great, though.
But you nailed it.
Well, I'll tell you I think we're headed for a similar moment, but as listeners may remember, I did run for the United States House of Representatives in 2018, and there was a cover story of all of the people who just decided that they could not stand what was happening in this country without trying to do something about it. And so I'm featured along with a great number of other women who for the first time ran for office. Many who, AOC's on that cover too, many who are still leading, I think, and really working to improve.
Well, to outdo you guys, I think I've been on the front cover of the Tribune a couple times.
And you're always consistent, John.
There you go.
Meaning you always look the same. With Dan McKay, they would always pick some really rough pictures. They did the same thing with Speaker Hughes.
Yeah.
It drives me nuts.
They do it all the time.
That the press won't do favorable pictures of people.
Yeah.
It's, they should.
Well, they should do favorable things.
Yeah. Okay. Listen, last week, this week, I guess also, but it's been a big week for people coming to our state. We've had the Secretary of Health and Human Services. We've had the Secretary of Transportation. The EPA administrator was here. All basically on the same day.
Sadly, because of Mia Love's funeral.
Yeah.
So they knew her. They were here because of that, but that also gave them time in our state.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you have any interaction with any of these, John?
I did not.
Yeah. The reason I mention it is I love when we get to have that nexus with our federal leaders. And the one that sticks in my mind is RFK Jr. coming. I know he spent some time up on the University of Utah campus, but he's praising Utah, John, for emerging as the leader for banning fluoride and embracing the Make America Healthy Again agenda.
Mm-hmm. Getting rid of dyes in foods and
Do you
so
like
forth,
all this? Where are you at on this?
I don't like as much government involvement in this. I like the markets to figure things out and let people shop with their dollars and their feet. So
Interesting.
I get the fluoride, which is kind of pushed in there by the government. So I fully support that. On the other ones, I think let the market decide.
I have this funny thing in the political middle where for John, the answer is always no government. And the answer for Shireen is often government. And I'm in the middle and I pick and choose.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. I'll just say that the research that even was cited in local coverage around the impacts of fluoride was not research that was done in the United States. It is not looking at fluorination that's added to water under the guidance, right, of a health intervention. It's looking at naturally occurring fluoride from rocks or from minerals that are in water in different places. This is pretty bad science to be making this kind of decision on. So I think it's concerning, but I do think it's part of a broader trend for RFK. And I think, unsurprisingly, there's a small but very vocal group of people that have quite a bit of influence around our Republican legislators that have convinced them that these ideas are good. And I'm worried about where it goes in the long term in terms of public health.
Yeah. You know, I won't say a lot about public health, but the EPA administrator coming to town and meeting with state leaders and talking about unlocking and creating a little bit more freedom for the state to solve its problems, to make choices about its future, basically deregulation, Shireen. But I kind of like that. I don't like the way that one-size-fits-all things come out of Washington and affect our state. And I have enough confidence in our leaders that they care about our state's future. I'm looking at John because Shireen's not going to agree with me.
Shireen's rolling her eyes, and I'm going,
I'm not
yippee.
rolling my eyes, but I'm saying
teasing.
there's room for regulation that keeps people safe. There's reasonable regulation. I think we all agree with that. I believe that there are some ways in which regulation has made, I'm actually listening to Abundance right now, the book that a lot of people on the left are talking about, the way that regulation has, hamstrung communities from building affordable housing when they need it.
This book is about building.
It's about building,
Yeah.
but you know what it's not about is public health. So let's get really clear about where regulation really matters and what it means to the outcomes of people's lives. And when you're cutting $880 billion from things like Medicare or Medicaid, the states aren't going to have the capacity to pick up the need in our communities for people who just need health care.
Listen, these deaths from measles are heartbreaking.
Heartbreaking.
They're heartbreaking.
And they're children.
My father was a pediatrician, and he was a pediatrician in the 1950s, and it's right when like the polio vaccine came and just a lot of breakthroughs. And my father, he's passed now, but he would have no patience for this.
Yeah.
And I disagree with Shireen. I mean, it's similar dollars. So federal or state, if the federal government isn't doing it and there's a demand at the state level, it will most likely happen at the state level. To act like it won't, I don't buy into that narrative.
I just would say, look how long this state delayed joining Medicaid expansion at the detriment of people's lives. People here died because we decided that we didn't want those federal dollars. So I hope that you're right, but I can tell you that there's evidence in this state that it takes a long time.
Yeah, but we have a history of the federal government making promises and commitments that it can't follow through on, and then it leaves the states holding the bag rather than letting them actively plan.
John, did you see the news that the state fertility rate, so Utah's fertility rate dropped again?
I heard this. This is shocking to me.
This is 15.
How much did it drop?
Well, not a lot.
From where?
Small changes, but it's about right now.
It used to be number one.
Yeah. So we're about 1.80 births per woman. And during my career, we were as high as, 2.6. And
Not
so
14, 15.
No,
sorry.
But the bigger point, the bigger point.
Nellie and I are
One of 11.
One of 11 each.
For the listeners, John and I both come families of 11 children. All right, I'm the youngest, he's the oldest, so there's some difference there. But the fertility rate in Utah has either declined or stayed constant for 15 consecutive years. It's a stunning number, and now we've fallen to the 10th highest in the nation. I would have guessed, as a young analyst in 1995, I would have always, in our long-term projections, projected Utah to have the highest fertility rate in the country. No question asked. It's not 10th.
Yeah.
What do you think's going on, Shireen?
Well, I think a few things are going on. I happen to know that one of the states that has leapfrogged us is North Dakota, and I believe South Dakota, where teen pregnancy is exploding. So very high rates of teen pregnancy.
That's a bad thing.
It's a bad thing.
Why is it exploding? What recently? What has changed?
A few things have changed. Abortion's illegal. There's not a single provider in North Dakota, illegal in South Dakota. So that's one surface thing, right? But I think the deeper issue is that there's almost no public health funding for reproductive care. There are a lot of folks that receive very little or no sex education in those states. And frankly, there's I mean, this was when I was growing up, but there was this kind of notion that, well, there was
studies a couple of years ago, right?
Studies in Rolling Stone about how North Dakota girls were easy. And I don't know if it's the long winters or what exactly it is, but there's a high rate of young people engaging in sexual activity.
Interesting. John, if I put a local look on it, I think of 33 of 35 years of net immigration to Utah. So all these new Utahns, right, that bring their proclivities with them, their fertility patterns. I think of housing costs. How hard it is to get into the ownership world. And so you might delay marriage, you delay childbirth.
Or you have room for one and you can't find that next house or whatever.
Yeah.
Right?
Whether it's space or dollars.
Right.
Yeah. So I don't know, pretty amazing thing. Okay.
I never would have guessed 10th though.
Yeah, that's something. John, Governor Cox has joined this letter encouraging action on Trump's policy priorities. This was a group of 22 Republican governors. They sent it to President Trump. They're supporting the Senate's budget resolution. I'm sure you've paid attention to this because of your interest in Washington, D.C. You have a son. Does your son still work in D.C.?
Yep.
Yeah.
He works
anyway,
back
give
there.
us some commentary on what Governor Cox did here.
Yeah, so I think there are many aspects of Trump's policies that are good and should be supported. I support extending the Trump tax cuts from many years ago. I have some concern in the Senate where they're playing some budget games, trying to count some things as if it's funded when it's really not in order to drive the agenda. I want us to cut the government and I want us to cut taxes simultaneously. I don't want us growing the debt or playing games about the debt.
Yeah. I don't know if Shireen, if you want to talk about this, or I've got another question for you.
I would just say it doesn't surprise me that Governor Cox is signing on to a letter, but I want to be clear what Trump's policy priorities are as related to this tax bill are $880 billion in cuts to Medicare and Medicaid, to healthcare. So that is a significant impact to elderly folks and children in our state. We're also talking about permanent and long-term cuts to community health centers, to SNAP, food benefits, to Head Start, offices that are closing. And all of this is happening to make sure that billionaires can continue to receive tax cuts. So that's what Governor Cox is saying he's great with.
Okay.
He's also talking about securing the border and making energy more affordable and making just your ability to live more cost effective.
The real tragedy is that our president could be pushing forward some of these pro-business, helpful to the economy measures without creating all this chaos with his stupid tariffs.
Yeah. And I'm not pro-business. I'm more pro-free market.
Yeah. Okay. I got to ask about the cell phones in Utah classrooms. This is Senator Lincoln Fillmore, Republican of South Jordan. This bill has gotten a lot of praise for what it's done. It basically bans phones in the classroom during classroom hours. Ceremonial signing this past week, but Governor Cox is reminding us that it should have gone bell to bell. That basically, when you're in school, you can't get on your phones. I bet you this is going to come, Shireen. I'll bet you we'll see another bill next year or the year following where we go bell to bell.
Yeah. So I'm not going to deny that there's quite a mounting body of research that suggests that the amount of time and the ways in which teenagers engage with their phones is detrimental to their health. It is. So
Yeah. John, you would have supported this bill. I mean, this is infringing on some rights.
I would have left it to the locals to figure out for themselves what makes sense. I don't think the legislature needed to weigh in on this. But at the end of the day, this is a bill that passed. You'll have to actually see what takes place down in the schools, in the classrooms. But the amount of screen time kids have, is too much.
All right. So Stephanie Pitcher, she is my representative, my senator, right?
Yeah.
She's been getting a lot of praise for the most successful Democratic lawmaker. She passed 14 bills. Am I getting this right?
Yeah.
What's going on there, Shireen?
I would say that she's an incredibly thoughtful, and in some ways, I think the way that some people come into politics is a bit more because they seem to enjoy the sound of their own voice. She doesn't feel like that to me.
I can see her being a future LG candidate on the Democratic side.
She's incredibly thoughtful, incredibly strategic, and I think really does the difficult and important work of building consensus across the aisle and finds a lot of issues that frankly are, I don't want to say common sense. I think it takes some ingenuity to come up with them. But
what else puts her in the news?
Her chess, because I've said that Shireen has this background in performing arts. I've said this is a great background for politics, performing arts, but I didn't know that chess was as well. John, what do you know about her chess
I don't know anything about her chess until right now, but clearly it's one of those games you got to think strategically, you got to think long term, and figure out the strategies, and clearly she's been an amazing chess player.
She's a wonderful leader, and we're lucky to have her.
I mean, 5-time chess champion at the age of 22.
Yeah, we got the Salt Lake Bees with their first home game. You've been to a game yet? I haven't
been to a game, but
Shireen.
No, I'm not going.
How's the new ballpark? Oh, protesting. It's not in Salt Lake.
I've been to 3 Bees games. I went actually more often when my kid was really small. It was really fun to be out on the field. But he doesn't like baseball, and I don't either.
Oh, I was thinking she's following the 21st South rule that Salt Lakers don't go south of 21st South.
Wow.
Not me. I love to go into southern Utah.
I gotta love it.
Is that Midvale?
Sandy?
Hey, everyone. Great conversation. We look forward to seeing you next week, and the program's produced by Anthony Scoma. Thanks for listening.